Yeah, thank you for coming to the side stage presentation. So today I'm going to be speaking, first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Xavier, so I'm the head of research and also ventures at Chorus One. I guess I want to sort of start off this presentation by saying when I first joined Chorus was about a year ago, and it came quite quickly to me that when you evaluate these networks, you only have a finite amount of resources in any validator company. And in a way, as a validator, you take bets on these networks because you, as a business, you like to earn revenues. And so you want to find the network that you think has the highest potential. So for example, for reasons that are not necessarily explainable, we're the number one node on Solana. We're quite good in Cosmos, but every network we look at now, these are really important bets. If you put your resources into networks that are not going to go anywhere, then you're going to lose time and finances and everything. So this presentation is a lot about what I look for when I look at these different networks, and hopefully if anyone in here, you can take something from it, I hope, and also feel free to reach out to me anytime, happy to help. So with that, we'll get started. So when it comes to when we evaluate a network, so I'm from a financial background. I have some technical ability as well. So we tend to look at the business and the technical side. And then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the types of roles that node operators play in Cosmos right now and the challenges as well that we're all facing. So business. So the purpose of evaluating networks as a validator, as I mentioned before, why do we go through this process in the first place? So Chorus One, we're now a team of 40 people right now. So we've expanded that from about 8 when I joined last year, so we've 5 times our resources. So this is really important. As you're scaling like this 5 times in 1 year, you need to be sure what they're all doing, when they're doing it, how they're doing it, what networks they're doing it on, so it's a lot of organization. Why you're doing this is to manage risk, because it can all fall apart at any stage, and this is really important. You can have the Cosmos networks deploying all the time, like this conference, but the validators that secure it, if these guys stuff up in any way, then these networks basically don't work very well. So business durability as well, of course, if you start choosing networks that are not sound, the resources that you've got, so we have 40 resources now, we start choosing networks that aren't very good, we're not breaking even with our own business, and we, of course, go out of business. Another nice thing about evaluating networks is that you observe trends. So of course, at Chorus, we're multi-chain. So I see Cosmos, Solana, Ethereum, Avalanche, I see almost all networks. And so you can see what networks are doing what, who might be a leader, and you get a lot of knowledge from that. And lastly is feasibility. We have these tech guys. So at Chorus One, we have shards. So we've got EVM shard, Solana shard, Cosmos shard. And then you need to work out, if you want to onboard a network, if they have the skills to do it or not, or what they need to learn that's new, because that's going to take time. So you want to take the lowest hanging fruit. Let's say it's Cosmos SDK is a perfect example. For us, that's very easy to onboard, like many other validators. So yeah, I think that's just something you need to take into consideration. Yeah. So I'm going to start first talking about product. So this is really important in Cosmos. Because Cosmos, the consensus, Cosmos SDK, Tendermint, everything else, IBC, this is in execution. So how you differentiate in Cosmos, at least right now from what I see, is really a lot to do on the product. Because what they want is thousands of blockchains. So it becomes much more like Web 2, where you're starting to compete on how good your product is. Of course, Web 3 has incentives as well, which we'll touch on in a bit. But when we first start looking at a product, we look at what's it in, DeFi, metaverse, gaming. Is there another decentralized exchange? There's 10 of them. I'm a validator. I'm not going to validate on all 10. I want to choose the best one. What other decentralized exchanges exist? So I'm going to research them, see what's the best, compare them, speak about it internally, etc. Market opportunity, this is how big the market is. So if they're doing something like blockchain for chairs, okay, it's $10. So even if I have 10% market share on that or whatever as a validator, I'm still earning $1. So if the market opportunity is big, let's say it's like metaverse and there's a big market opportunity. So Passage is a good example of this, which is going live in Cosmos soon. That's a huge market opportunity. So that could potentially be very successful, and that might be the first in Cosmos. So we're, of course, going to try and participate in that. Go to market. So this is really important as well. So often I'll talk to networks and they will sort of have a lot of different things in mind about what they want to solve, like problems, for example. And it's, of course, in crypto, you can solve a lot of problems with one network. But it's really important, at least for me, that they're sort of focusing on one problem that hasn't really been solved in the best way before. Either they're focusing on a problem that's never been solved, or focusing on a problem that has been solved, but they're doing it in a much better way. Because if they're doing it in a worse way, of course, they're not going to win out, unless there's marketing or something, but this is normally the way it goes. Competitive advantage, of course, like why are they doing this network now? Understanding, is this the right time? Is it too early? So I was talking about MEV before on that stage. Like MEV is very early. So it's like maybe if you build an MEV product now, which I know some people are in Cosmos, it might be a bit too early because people they're not familiar with it yet. There needs more research. So you need to understand if it's the right timing. And the execution risk. This is probably one of the biggest ones in product. Okay, they've got this vision, they've got a white paper, they've got a roadmap, but can they execute on it? Like, what's the risk? Who's the team? Like, who's actually executing on bringing this? Because, for example, there's a network we onboarded sort of recently without naming names. Like, even me, I was a huge fan of the network, like research, like everything. They had an amazing team, not Cosmos. And then it came to onboarding validators and they struggled. They didn't know how to communicate with validators or run the actual network, the peer-to-peer layer. So this is massive. So the product might look amazing and they might be doing something really great, and then they come to running the network with you as nodes and governors, and then they just fail. And that, of course, and you lose time, again, as a validator. So that next, we'll take a look at the team and foundation. So, where are they coming from? Are they coming from Web 2? They're coming from Web 3? They're coming from finance? The size, so, you have, maybe it's like 3 or 4 of them. So what are they trying to build versus how big their team is? So that's also important. So if the vision is big, like who's joining, how are they getting people to join, you can ask these questions when you start talking to these networks. The distribution, is it just 4 engineers and then they're like really struggling on marketing, which we sometimes see with our portfolio companies? Is it BD, is it research, like do they need these members, like sort of understanding that. The treasury, of course, like, there's, especially in Cosmos, they have these treasuries that's a lot of money. Like, how are they deploying this money? Are they deploying it in the most efficient way that's going to grow the network? And then the delegation program. So, of course, for any validators in here, quite often a great way, I didn't talk about it on stage before, but this is true. A great way to decentralize a network is for the foundation themselves to distribute their stake to as many validators as possible. Don't give your stake to Chorus One and Figment, like, as a foundation. You should be trying to incentivize the lower validators. So that's really important. Okay, so this is more of like a signaling thing. So once we talk to a network, we start looking at who else is involved, like the partners, the investors, and the community. So who's invested? Like previous investments, is there no VC? Is it Cosmos VCs? Is it external VCs? Who's involved? Like, what sort of community are they building here? The relationships with node operators, like I mentioned before. So, okay, how much does a network value these node operators? Are they just building a product and a network without considering at all, like the node operators, and then it comes to the getting them all in a circle and Discord, all of a sudden it all turns to poo because they can't communicate well when the network fails. So other partnerships, of course, so like I'm going to bring up the example of Passage again, which I really like, and I'm a big fan of Passage. So talking to Lex, they're working with Juno, they're working with Akash, they're working with many different networks, and so they come from like a more gaming background and like, virtual environment background, and they didn't know a lot about blockchain. They're using Bitwit to build the blockchain. But what's nice about Cosmos is that people really underestimate, and they were talking about before as well, like mentorship. So you can leverage people in the Cosmos. Everyone wants to help you. So who are they partnered with this network? Are they trying to do everything themselves and segregate themselves? Or are they trying to utilize what's already in the Cosmos to build the best product possible? Existing users, of course, this is like quite easy. Normally you can find this sort of data on like, maybe it's on testnet, or maybe you can just ask users of the community or whatever. You can find ways to understand who's using it right now, will they continue to use it, and you can sort of make some judgment there on how big it's going to be. Then, of course, social engagement, Twitter, Discord, followers. It's hard to tell. You don't know how organic it's going to be, but you can normally get a fair gauge. Okay, token economics. This is like, sort of like, we're at Chorus One, we really care about token economics. There are some firms in crypto, like Delphi, for example, that are just like absolutely amazing at this, and people really forget how important token economics are in these networks. It can be the make or break of a network. So inflation. So in Cosmos, we see a lot of networks like Osmosis, Stargaze, some really high inflation networks. This is quite like unique to Cosmos. And what it incentivizes is, of course, people to stake their assets first of all. But then also with osmosis, you now have like superfluid staking. And what's happening in the first year of most of these networks is that the price appreciation, osmosis is like an anomaly because the price did appreciate for osmosis. But you could probably expect that the price will go down because some people liquidate their staking rewards, etc. But what's actually happening, the most important part, is the token distribution and how it's being distributed across all these people across different dexes and decentralizing the token distribution. So that's like interesting to think about. Also, if you're a validator and it's like 2% inflation, of course, the rewards for you and versus osmosis, if the network might be the same success, it's osmosis versus another DEX, and the other DEX has 2%. Okay, as a validator, I'm going to choose osmosis because the product's the same, but the rewards are way better. Number of validators, of course, if there's 100 in Cosmos, that's great. But the one that I was talking about before, there was way less. So sometimes I guess the amount of complexity, let's say there's 10 validators and the network itself isn't running very well. So because there's less people helping, it's harder to bring the network back up. So the number of validators can count for that, and also for, like, of course, the staking reward distribution. So if there's less validators, there might be more rewards for you as well. So it's a trade-off, because there might be more work for you if the network doesn't work. But if it does work and there's less validators, you'll get more rewards. Token distribution, this is, of course, how much has been allocated to investors, the supply of the token. Like, inflation also goes with this a little bit as well. When's it, like, vesting and unlocks from investors as well? This is all, like, goes into it. Of course, you don't want people to just dump the token, and then after 1 year, everyone runs off, and then the network sort of fails in that way. And that's, of course, vesting as well. Then the private round valuation. So what we do at Chorus One, for any validators in here, we sort of have financial projections of a network, which include like the inflation, the amount of validators, different like token prices and market caps. Who else is it? Like all these sort of different metrics, trying to list them off the top of my head. And then we have like scenario analysis basically in finance. You have 4 different scenarios, and then you try and find a base case using net present value of like what you could be earning per year if you run a validating node on this network. So token economics in this like financial aspect is like really important if you're going to run a node on a network. Can help a lot, like when deciding how you prioritize your resources. So staking mechanism, some quite obscure words, the first 2 dot points for staking, but like slashing and bonding. So like, of course this matters. In Cosmos it's normally quite similar, but you can be slashed, and in Cosmos especially, like Solana's different, for example, you can't be slashed. But in Cosmos, if you're double signing, etc., you need to know this. And so what we do for this as well, for anyone interested, like we have a Notion page with like all the staking and economic details, which includes like the maximum penalty. So bonding means like if you want to start running a node on a network, how much of your own stake do you need to start running a node? So like Covalent, for example, was another network that we're going to like onboard in the next few weeks. And in their staking mechanism, it is a requirement that we do have our own tokens. So if you think about like decentralization again, like the ways that you can decentralize a network more, well, one of the ways you can decentralize it more is by not requiring the validators to have tokens themselves, because then they might need to buy it. People do this because they want validators to have more skin in the game, but what ends up happening, which happened on Tezos as well, is that basically you can just borrow the Tezos, so it doesn't actually, there's ways to mitigate it. And also we were talking about it before, but like how can you get these lower validators to like get more rewards so everyone's more even? Even if you did that, which I think would be great for the ecosystem, there are normally ways that you can like mitigate it that people haven't even really thought of yet. Like for example, staking, like locking up your tokens on Atom for 3 weeks. Now you have liquid staking, which means you can sort of go in between your staking assets within like 3 weeks. So people will always build things in crypto that get around certain aspects, and normally financially they'll find ways to do that. The reward mechanism, of course, like how they pay out, for example, governance. So this is sort of important, but like how do you vote? How frequent are the votes? Like on Osmosis, there are a lot of different votes, which is great. That's awesome for the network, but then it requires more resources on our end. So yeah, that's like really important for us. And other node operator roles, like oracles, liquidation, stuff like that. So technical. This is more like not on my end, but I'm going to share it here anyway, just in case it helps anyone. Sorry, I'm missing a dot point there, but like, so what I'll normally do with like people in the Cosmos, like a product manager, for example, whereas I'm more of a researcher, I'll work with them and they'll assess their GitHub, like the quality of the GitHub, the organization, like how they're using tags and stuff like that. And so, of course, I'm not assessing this myself, but I'm like communicating with our technical product manager what he thinks of the GitHub, like, is it in Go or Rust? This is more like not judging the language, but judging if we can actually understand the language itself and we can do it. And of course, the contributors, like who's involved, just seeing if we can understand anything about like the project itself. So it's more just like technical due diligence on that end. And of course, I can't explain very much on this end because I'm not as involved there. but I do have a few slides on it in case it helps. Sorry. There we are. So documentation. So like sometimes in a new stage of a network, they can go live or they can like start onboarding validators, but it can be a really great sign from a DevOps perspective if they have documentation that's really easy for us to read, understand, use. Is it complete, comprehensive, and updated? Like sometimes as well, what you find with documentation is that like this happened with a previous network, which is like, okay, everything was ready to go. We were about to onboard it, and then they decided to change basically how the network worked, but there wasn't much documentation for like how it changed. It was like a fork, and so it's quite hard for us to understand. So it's really positive sign from a network if they share updated documentation with you. It's also related to communication, so if they do update the documentation, they communicate it with you. So of course, like just DevOps stuff. So architecture, this is more for us like, and again, with resources, okay, we've only got a few resources. How complex is the architecture? If the vision is grand, that's like awesome for the network, and we want to help them and secure that in the best way possible. If it's really complex for us, like like we have to commit. Basically, it's all about commitments. And so if it's really complex, we'll try our best to onboard it. But then if it's too much for us, we might have to say no, for example, and just prioritize our resources. And we, of course, wish them all the best and help them find other validators. But that can obviously be like, this goes with feasibility as well. Like the technical feasibility, can we really do this or not? Is it our stack? Like maybe we've got more Cosmos engineers than Ethereum engineers. So if it's Cosmos, like I said before, we have a big Cosmos team. So the technical feasibility for us for that is like quite good because we have a lot of people that understand the technology. Signing support, again, this is more platforms than me, but what's the curve? Like, does it support hardware security modules? And then the roadmap, this is more like what do they've got planned? How many upgrades will they need? How can we support them in the best way possible? And because, of course, I think a main thing for us as well is like, we can't be on all networks, and there's so many great networks going live on Cosmos right now. So it's like on us, if we commit to a network, we have to make sure that we have the resources to really live up to their expectations of us and manage their expectations. Because it's not fair for these networks to go live, like onboard, like we say we onboard it, then we don't have the resources, and then they like always sort of pinging us saying like, can you please upgrade? So it's just like, it's really a validator's responsibility to, when you commit, it's like a relationship, and it's like, you must support them in every way possible. And if you can't support them in every way possible with the resources you have, you should say no, because they deserve better than that, basically. Governance, I sort of talked about it before, but like, do they have specifications, processes? In Cosmos, it's very lucky. Governance is very straightforward. This matters for other networks outside Cosmos. Like sometimes it's off-chain, sometimes it's on-chain, sometimes it's a hybrid. So what are the processes? Of course, like for example, in Cosmos, what does change sometimes, like osmosis, is it 3 days? Is it 14 days? Is it 7 days? Like you just have to be aware, so you have to keep track of all of this to understand. And again, like it's a validator's responsibility to make sure you are getting to every vote, understanding every vote, and you're contributing back to these ecosystems. And then, okay, upgrades, I talked about it before, but like as a validator, you need to prioritize your resources and make sure that you are at every single upgrade. How frequent are the upgrades? How are they being communicated? So maybe I can spend like 2 seconds on communication. Like one thing as a network, so for a validator, it's really nice when someone, and there's like Slack, Telegram, like emails, like everything now. Like I'm someone who actually doesn't mind all these communication channels, but sometimes what can be nice is for people to choose one, like as a network, or a validator choose one. This is something that validators themselves can probably work on, like working with a network, like coming together at the start, being like, how should we communicate? Because sometimes there can be too many communication channels between everyone, and that's probably because they don't come to consensus at the start. So yeah, communication is like one of the biggest things in crypto, especially because you have so many stakeholders in these networks. So starting a network, like finding validators, like, or with a delegation program, bootstrapping the network, and then everyone agreeing on how you're going to communicate. It can be any forum, like probably the network should choose that, and then just making sure you're updated with what they're doing and making sure you can support it as well. So the last 2 slides I've got, there's monitoring and alerting, of course. Like it can really help you if there's tooling or open source dashboards. Really, really nice. Like some communities, like Terra, for example, this can happen with time and just maturity and experience, but like we have our own monitoring and alerting, and to be honest, like that's not as much my like sort of understanding of like the business, so I won't go deep into it, but it can help, of course, if there are dashboards and stuff that really help. So I just want to quickly finish off with like, I guess, node operators in the ecosystem and like what we're sort of doing these days. So I guess like my job is like sort of analyzing these networks and what's going on, and the takeaway here is that the role of a node operator is like really changing. Like when Cosmos went live a few years ago, it was, sort of you'd run a node on a network, it was proof of stake. Now there are bridges left, right, and center. You have to sort of understand what bridges are going live. You want to be supporting the best bridges. But more than that, because there's so many networks we're now running nodes on, and they're all go-to-market, because quite early they want to bootstrap their nodes. So you can see these different networks like going live, and each time we see a different network go live, we like sharing our expertise with the next network. So like what worked, what didn't, give them feedback, because networks want to hear that. And of course, this is like, as Chorus One, for example, we have experience. Like we want to share this with the networks. So it's nice. We're in a really unique role where we can share what has worked, what hasn't worked. And what's nice in Cosmos is that every iteration, every network that goes live, hopefully the validators themselves are like sharing what they've learned from these like different networks going live, and it really improves every network that goes live. GDM experience, of course, like marketing or token economics. So sometimes we share our advice with that as well. What has worked, what hasn't worked. Like just also the conversations we have. Like a lot of it is knowledge transfer and sharing, because like a network wants to focus on what they're building, like the product, and like they want to go to market with that. And so the validators, like they've seen what works a lot as well. It's like this mentor thing, as Zaki was talking about a bit before as well. And maybe a good time to also mention as well. So Ignite. I don't know if anyone saw like on Twitter the last few days, formerly Tendermint. So they've got this incubation program going on now, and we're a part of that as Chorus One. There's like 10 partners there. And so what we hope with this is that basically we can just incubate these small teams like that are brilliant, and then share everything we know, like so not just one of us, but like 9 other validators and partners, all sharing what we've learned, like all incubating these projects, like getting them to market faster, more efficiently with better products. And just, again, like knowledge transfer and sharing and helping them going to market. And then, of course, like, we're well connected cross-chain. So if you want to bridge, or if you want to like use some partners or even BD or whatever you want, I guess, we have these relationships, which is nice, and we can utilize that. And then just finally, the final slide here is, of course, like decentralizing. We talked about it in the last session, but this is a big problem, and we want to help out in the best way possible for this. I don't know if there's an answer for this. Like, I'm sure there is, and we're really looking forward to hopefully contributing to this and like really helping node operators scale with the resources they have. Like a lot of node operations in general is just resources, and I keep saying that word, but like it's really important. Like if you have these expenses as a small node operator, we really want to help you out, like to make sure you can make this set. Incentivizing relays, of course. So we don't run relays as Chorus One, but this is something in Cosmos that is important now, and like there's still ongoing research, which is like sort of a nice problem space to check out. Platform engineer talent is like, there's not many, like there are great platform engineers out there, but there could be more. So it's like incentivizing these guys and trying to bring them over to crypto, because they're literally the heart and soul of crypto, these platform engineers. So can never have like too little of them. Maintenance of network upgrades, of course, like the more upgrades there is for a team, the harder it is to get to all of them. So they need to be really careful before they commit to onboarding a network, that they're going to make sure they do all the upgrades and like really secure this network. And finally, just monitoring governance. It's more like, again, you just need to grow the team a little bit. Like the more networks you're on board, the more governance you need to make sure, because you need to be there every single vote, basically. So yeah, I wanted to sort of leave the floor open. I'm not sure how I'm going for time, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sorry if I wanted it to be more conversational, this presentation. So yeah, happy to answer any questions now about anything to do. And here's my last slide. Yeah, validating is still a new business. Like we've only been doing this for a few years, and yeah, looking forward to the future. Yes, sir. No, we're not, no. Yeah. Sure. So right now, it's like in Cosmos, so I know like Jack is working on Relayer DAO, for example, which I'm really, to be honest, I need to do much more research into this. I've been meaning to get to it. It's about incentivizing the relays, and when you incentivize it, you probably know like you get more decentralized relays, and that, of course, is great for IBC. So, us as Chorus, for example, just to take our example, like we haven't joined, like it's always something that we're researching, in terms of like implementing it or executing our own relayer, like we haven't joined. I think it's in our intention to join at some stage, but it's a bit of a different game, like relaying to validating, because of course the setup's a little bit different. And so I know Larry, like between, I think it was like Osmosis and Terra or something like that, like he was the only relayer. Like that's a centralization risk in itself, I guess. So I don't have the answer for that now, but I think what's exciting is that I'm sure Cosmos has so many great minds in it, like that will be solved, I hope, in the next 6-12 months. Yeah, and I don't know, do you have any sort of idea yourself about how that might be solved? Yeah, that's what that's what I'm hoping for as well. Yeah, you know, definitely. You know what's interesting, sorry, is I've been thinking a little bit about this recently, of like right now, there's not much incentivization for relays apart from the chains paying for it themselves. So I wonder with like asynchronous MEV, if there's an opportunity across chains, and of course the relayer is the only person that can get you that opportunity. Maybe in the future at some stage, like you will have to pay the relayer to execute this opportunity for you, and that might be the way that they earn the fees. This might be too far in the future, but that could be like one potential way of solving it. I don't know because I'm not deep enough in the relay space, but it could be interesting to think about, I think. Who knows? Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah. Who knows? Yes, sir.
About All right. If it works, then it's even better. But I had a question about the tokenomics and the return on investment that all these validators have to make an estimate about, right? Are there any tools there? I mean, Excel spreadsheets, Jupyter notebooks. I mean, what are you looking for?
So,
because all these networks are different too, right? I mean, all the fees and this and that and all the incentives.
Yeah. So, like for example, what we use, like this sheet, it would be great to open source it. But wondering, like, I mean, maybe we will at some stage because we're very, like, we appreciate open sourcing at Chorus. But I guess for a network, what could be a risk here is if we give it to all you guys, for example, and girls, like, and then everyone's using the same spreadsheet and everyone's running the same analysis, and then, like, everyone's choosing the same networks. And it's like everyone's choosing the successful networks, and then the ones that aren't so successful, like, everyone shares the same thing. It's a great question because I don't know necessarily the answer to it, right. But I can explain a bit what we use, basically, like I talked about it a bit before. So like these 4 scenarios we use, like let's say that it might already be trading if we're a bit late. So the base case is like the trading price now. Then we have like a bear case, which is like maybe 50% less. Then we have like a bull case, which is maybe like 4 or 5 times more, and then another case. And then like you look at the inflation, the amount staked, of course, matters in token economics. So let's say that right now it's already live, there's 60% stake. So in these cases, like, I mean, okay, it's a financial case, so let's talk about like the bull case, even though of course you don't want this, like in terms of a validator mindset, like you have less stake in the bull case because there's more rewards going to like the validators, I guess, and then in the more bear case, there's more stake, so there's like less rewards going to the validators, or from inflation. So it's just about like sort of changing the input slightly for different amounts of stake, different token prices, different like commissions as well, like depends what validator commission you take. It's anything you can think about with numbers and fees and prices and supply and stuff like that. Right. And then creating like net present value. What I do recommend validators is to look into net present value. It's like a financial model you can use to sort of map out the financial returns you can make. And what we do, it's per year, so we'll like map it out. And what we don't do though is we don't like, and we should do this, but we don't like do the NPV and then look back like 1 year later. It's more like we just onboard and we don't really look back. But it's probably also a good procedure to see how far off you are with the initial projections.
A lot of the networks are not even 1 year old, so it's
yeah, it's hard to know exactly. Like, it's hard. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if it works.
Now you have the incubation, what you explained. So you have like 10, with 10 others. And with a lot of Cosmos chains, let's say the top 20 own 2/3, or let's say 1/3 on the top 10. So how do you view that? How we can for new other validators that are not big and don't have, the name? How can they become bigger? What are your advice?
Yeah. I think what works well for Chorus that I recommended, so like I don't know if anyone in here knows like DeFi Times, for example. They're like some of my best mates in Lisbon. So what they're really great at, and they're quite a successful validator, and they started a few months ago, is like content, I think, can be cool. So like writing about a network, having them on some podcast, researching a little bit about a network. I think in Cosmos it can be like underrated, like just doing a little bit, like if I am a token holder on Osmosis, for example, maybe, and like there's some cool thing for you, which is like, oh, they're doing, I think there's like some lending thing or some leverage thing they're doing on Osmosis soon, like putting out some content, and then some of it is marketing, of course. Like it's hard because I joined Chorus 1 year ago, and we were already a bit of a bigger validator, let's say. So, and we were lucky because we were early, so to say. So like some of it is just timing as well. Like maybe if we joined today, we would be struggling. Like you honestly don't know. So for a newer validator, all I can say is what works for us quite well, and it's just like content and participating in community discussion, and also maybe as well what could be done, like we don't necessarily do this, but let's say there might be like an investor, for example, that has some tokens, or some people that have tokens in a network that can delegate to you. This can also be good. So for example, if you are a newer validator and you're talking to some Cosmos network that's about to join the Cosmos, you can even ask them being like, oh, do you know any investors that might want to sort of stake some proportion of their tokens with us? That can really, really help, and that's something that I would suggest any new validators to try and do.
Process, how difficult it was to add that new blockchain, and there's lots of due diligence and everything else, because there's a lot of work to support it. But when the ERC20 tokens kind of came out, it was like suddenly the cost of adding something was like down to about 10 minutes of changing some config and adding a new token, and suddenly it's supported. And so we saw exchanges just list a whole bunch of stuff, thinking that the cost was quite low. And now, like a few years later, have to start to delist it all because no one's interested in it, or actually the cost of supporting it later is higher because there's governance and all those other things that, or they are creating some non-ERC20 token to its own native chain, and you've got to then support that, and there's lots of them. Could you see, could something similar happen with Cosmos, especially if everyone's using the same SDK and the same consensus, and actually the cost for you guys to actually add every single new chain, and then maybe thousands in like a year or two, is quite low. But would you then have you thought about what your process would be to kind of offboard from networks you're on?
Yeah. So that's another great question, and this is sort of similar to the decentralization question as well. So right now, I can sort of say for many of the larger validators, there are significant bottlenecks, and like we're having to turn around like quite a fair few new networks. We can only get to like a small number now, and that really opens up the floor to like these newer validators to come into like validate on these networks, which I think is really good for decentralization. So one of the positive side things of this, like it's like the ICO thing on Cosmos, is that potentially there are going to be some SDK chains that do fantastically, and they're going to have a validator set that is completely different to Chorus and Figment and whoever else, like with new validators, and that's one of the more exciting things. And I think right now in Cosmos, we're going into this stage of like an explosion of chains. So for sure, Chorus and Figment, because we're already like, imagine our capacity is like, we're at like 102% capacity out of 100, so we can't actually physically onboard that many more networks. No. So, like, at least for us, like, we're doing our best to onboard networks, but it's like there's a lot of space for newer validators to probably take our market share. I would think, like, and that's great. That's a great thing. It's good for competition. So one unique thing about Chorus is this, where like, so other validators like your block daemons, I don't know if anyone's in Figment here, but like they're a bit bigger than us. So we're like 40 still. So some of these guys are like 200. And we deliberately keep small because we want to make sure everyone that comes in the company like cares about crypto, cares about what we're doing. And so one of the trade-offs of that is that we can't get to as many chains we only found this out recently. We were talking to some of our peers, and even the ones that are at 200 are struggling now. So that's saying something. So there's a lot of space for small validators coming now and just start talking to chains. I think as well, what I would like to see, because of course I'm part of Ignite, I'd love to get small validators in there in the next like ASAP, like get them in, get them in the process, like help them out. I think there's a lot of chance that it's going to stay decentralized Cosmos because the whole ecosystem would never allow just like 3 or 4 crappy like validators like saying you do this. So yeah, like we love being in Cosmos, but we're always going to do our best to help everyone else out as much as we can. Cool. Great. Oh, by the way, in case anyone wants to like, you can chat to me around. I'll be around the place or like on Telegram, Xavier Meegan, or Twitter, Xavier, Xavier. Cheers for coming, everyone. Appreciate it.